All right, in the last video we learned how we could make type and customize it by using the typeface tools within vector.com, the freeware, and then modifying them anchor by anchor point, right? And really playing with the kerning and the spacing, and then saving it as an SVG. Before that, in the videos, I showed how you can do it with the pen tool, kind of a way of modifying and just drawing it for yourself. And I got this SVG. And the reason I like vector.com, if it still works the way it used to work, which you never know with freeware, is that you can open an SVG that way. So I'm going to open up this SVG. And when you design it on your own, you can always just modify the anchor points and really limit it, right? But as long as it's a vector and an SVG, the next step is to bring it into your Photopea layout. And I already have a layout as a PSD file. And this is what I showed in the Monday videos. So I'm going to open up Photopea. And then I'm going to open up my PSD. But I'll demonstrate again. So I brought that type in just as a black type. And then I turned off everything. And then I saved it as a JPEG. And then I put that into the assignment. Where is the assignment? In this window. So that's what you see there, right? But the important thing is that this was dragged and dropped into a file that was set up to be 16 by 20 inches or more at 300 pixels per inch or more. This will allow us to print our posters the largest possible size that our lab printers support. You can always go larger than 16 by 20, and you can always go larger than 300 pixels per inch, but that's the standard for this. All right, now I am thinking of my cereal boxes and these kind of inspirations and trying to think, how do I want to color this text? Now let me show you how I would do it with the new SVG I made, even though I'm not going to use it, just because I demoed it. If I wanted like a more medieval take on the Nighthawk, I just dragged and dropped the SVG in, and then I size it. And because it's a vector file, it will come in as a smart object. I can even squeeze it by holding down Shift and Option, hit return, and there you see it, right? As a vector, if I hit Option Command T, I can also try to do things like skew it if I want to give it a little bit of an italicized look. I can shift it like this. And maybe that makes it look a little bit more like a breakfast cereal, right? And as long as it stays a smart object, it's still a vector. So you can do a lot of transform tools with Option Command T and still keep it a vector. And that's the requirement, that your text be a vector. So you see how this that typeface, this type design, what they call a type solution, works well if this was maybe like a sports mascot, which it actually is because this is our campus mascot. But I think this one works a little bit better if it's a breakfast cereal. So I'm going to go with this one. And then I made another SVG out of vector.com, which is just this star. Then I'm going to make bigger here. Drag it down. This little vector star. And I make that separate so I can place it separately. And I realize that this star isn't just black and white, But that's because I'm going to show you how, as long as you have a smart object to start with, you can really take liberties with modifying it once you're in a raster program like Photopea. Okay, now I want to bring in an inspiration. And the inspiration I'm going to bring in is this one. And I'm just going to drag and drop it in. This way I can steal colors. Because the mascot is green and blue, I think the complements to that, red and orange, is really going to work well for the color of the type design. And by bringing it into Photopea, that allows me to steal those colors directly. So how do you do that? Well, all you do is you make a duplicate of your black type. So I take this layer, this black type layer, and I Command J, duplicate it, and then I double click on it to get my layer styles. And the first layer style I'm going to play with is going to be a color overlay. And that color I'm going to choose is not going to be on the color selector. I'm just going to steal it right from this reference. Because if it's open in Photopea, I can just click on it and steal it. Right? So I actually like this kind of orangey one a little bit better than the bright yellow. Or what you see is it's kind of a gradation here, right? But I'm going to start with the yellow. And you're going to see how I can get something very similar to this, just using layer styles. The next thing I'm going to do is what's called satin. And the satin color I'm going to use is not black. It's going to be a darker orange. Maybe like this. And I'm going to set it at dissolve and at a lower opacity, and I'm going to play with these distances. This is exactly actually how this designer got this kind of speckled interior shadow in this type. So I can play with the angle. I'm going to do it from above, play with the distance, really shrink the distance, and shrink the scale. And then get the angle until it's where I want it. And you can be really fussy with this. I'm going to be pretty loose with it because it's just about having fun with type design. I can always play with a higher opacity, but you can kind of see what that's doing. It's giving it this kind of textural flair. All right, next, I'm going to give it a stroke. And the stroke I'm going to give it is going to be on the outside, and it's not going to be black. It's going to be this red color. Boom. And it's going to be a lot bigger than 3 pixels. It's going to be so big that except for very little gaps, like right there, a tiny bit there, it's going to fill in all the kerning between the letters. So it makes it really strong and graphic, which is great for food packaging. Great for cereal, right? Even if it extends it a little bit too big, because I can always place it a little differently. Okay, notice that this does not give me that 3D effect though. This is just a stroke. If I want to play with the 3D effect, I can play with adding to the stroke a drop shadow that uses normal mode and that same color. And because you don't see it, it's because the drop shadow is too small. If I make that distance bigger, you're going to start to see it at full opacity. Increase the size, rather increase the spread. And we can start to get that 3D effect. That is not the ideal way to get the 3D effect in my mind. It's kind of messy. So if I turn off the stroke, you'll see it, right? So here's a way I like better. not do it with the drop shadow. Instead, just duplicate your color type again. Command J. Come on, Command J. There we go, made 2 copies. And now I'm going to rasterize, what's called rasterize the layer style. So now they're just regular pixels, which allows me then to double click it and then color overlay it all with one color that takes up the full shape. And that color I'm going to choose for the color overlay is the red, right? Then I'm going to put that behind my other color layer. And what I'm going to do then is offset it, which simply means you drag it a little bit off to one side. And you see how that gives me that 3D effect in a much bolder way. Okay, see how that works? Just by putting that offset underneath. So this is what's underneath, and then this is what's on top. All right. And then what's great about that is I can rasterize that layer style. All of it's to the right resolution. And if I wanted those little gaps in the G, I can just delete it out and get it. And in the I can delete it out and get it. I think there was one maybe here. Yeah. So anywhere I want that kind of separation, I can have it. And if this needs to be a little bit straighter, I can do that. Right? I can even just use my magic wand and kind of fill in gaps. It's the black line art that matters. The color line art is a variation on your black vector. So feel free to duplicate, to rasterize, as long as you have black vector type for your, as part of your file. You're in good shape. And I can get really, really picky here, but that's pretty good so far. Now, what am I missing? I'm missing a stroke, a white stroke around all of it, right? That this has, that I like. And I'm missing little highlights. And I'm not going to be too fancy with it. So all I'm going to do is put all of my color type layers, select them all. Here they are. I have another one here. Yeah, I don't like that black stroke so much. But I could try rasterizing this and then playing with a blending mode at a low opacity. Ooh. Gives me a little something. Yeah, I like that. All right, so now I'm going to take all of those, all the ones except my black vector type, I'm going to put them into a folder, right? Big difference. And then I'm just going to shift that folder a little bit over. Actually, no, I'm not even going to bother with that. What I'm going to do is duplicate that whole folder, Command J, and then rasterize that by merging that all into one. Why do that? Because then I can put a stroke around all of it. And you're not going to really see that unless you have a colored background. So let me give myself a colored background. So I'm just going to use layer 3, and I'm going to edit fill with a custom color. And that custom color, I'm just going to steal this blue. I don't think that's what I'm going to stick with, but just to get started. All right. Now, what else do I need? Now I can put a stroke white stroke around